The year is 89 AD, and Julia Marcella stands at the edge of the Colosseum's upper gallery, her fingers white as she grips the stone railing. Below her, in the blood-soaked sand 50 meters down, her husband Gaius has just fallen. The crowd of 45,000 Romans erupts in a sound that's neither cheering nor booing, but something far more sinister, a collective intake of breath that signals they know something she doesn't yet understand. Gaius clutches his side where the Thracian fighter's blade found its mark, crimson spreading across the sand in a pattern that looks almost beautiful from this height. Julia's 6-year-old son tugs at her stola, asking when father will come home. She has no answer, because 3 nights ago a letter was pushed under their door in the Subura district, written in what looked like dried blood on cheap parchment. When he falls, your family falls with him. She had burned it immediately, told herself it was the cruel joke of a jealous neighbor, nothing more. After all, Gaius had won 37 consecutive fights. He was celebrated across Rome. The gold he earned kept them comfortable, kept them safe, or so she had believed. But as she watches her husband being dragged from the arena by attendants dressed as Charon, the ferryman of the dead, still breathing but barely conscious, Julia sees something that makes her blood stop in her veins. The Emperor Domitian in his private box, isn't he giving the thumbs up for mercy or thumbs down for death? His thumb extends horizontally, parallel to the ground, a gesture she's never seen before, but instinctively understands means something worse than either option. The woman beside her, draped in silk so expensive it could feed Julia's family for a year, leans close enough that Julia can smell wine and imported perfume. Your husband fought bravely, she whispers, and there's something in her smile that doesn't reach her eyes. But even the greatest fall eventually, and when they do, well, that's when the real entertainment begins. What Julia doesn't know as she hurries her children down the stone corridors toward the exit, doesn't know as she navigates the crowd still drunk on blood and spectacle, doesn't know as she rushes home hoping to find Gaius already there recovering from his wounds, is that armed men are already waiting at her door. She doesn't know that within hours her son will be torn from her arms and sold to training school where children are systematically broken before being fed to animals for sport. She doesn't know that her 4-year-old daughter will disappear into a network of brothels that specialize in the youngest victims. She doesn't know that she herself will become property of a consortium of wealthy Romans who have formed what they call a grief society. Men who have discovered that the suffering of a gladiator's widow provides an entertainment more exquisite than anything the arena can offer. Most importantly, Julia doesn't know that her husband's injury was not the random fortune of combat. The Thracian had been paid to wound, not kill, because in the twisted mathematics of Roman entertainment, a gladiator's death is merely the opening act. The real show begins afterward, when his family is destroyed piece by piece, their suffering stretched out over months or years as the warning to every other fighter who might dare to dream of freedom or dignity or a life beyond the sand. This is the story Roman historians tried to bury, the systematic nightmare that unfolded behind the glory and spectacle, the machinery of destruction that made crucifixions and lion feedings seem merciful by comparison. The moment a gladiator fell, whether through death or crippling injury, a well-oiled machine of destruction was set into motion. Unlike the public spectacle of the arena, what happened to families occurred in shadows, in administrative chambers, beneath the city where screams were swallowed by stone and bureaucracy. The Romans had perfected the art of making an entire bloodline pay for one man's failure, and they did so with methodical precision that would impress even their most organized military campaigns. Within 3 hours of Gaius being carried from the Colosseum, while physicians work to save his life in the gladiator barracks, armed guards arrive at Julia's modest apartment. They don't come as executioners, but as collectors, because in Rome's twisted legal system, a gladiator's debts don't die with his defeat. They multiply and transfer to his surviving family like an inherited curse. Every meal Gaius ate during training, every weapon he touched, every bandage used to treat his injuries, even the sand that soaked up his blood, All of it was itemized in careful ledgers and now becomes Julia's responsibility. She finds herself owing 35,000 denarii, a sum so astronomical that even a wealthy merchant would struggle to pay it in a lifetime. But the Romans aren't interested in payment, they're interested in ownership. The debt is merely the legal mechanism that allows them to seize everything. The furniture, the clothing, the wooden toys her children clutch as they watch their world collapse. But possessions are just the beginning, because in Rome, if you cannot pay your debts, you become property yourself. Julia and her children are herded into the street like animals, while former neighbors watch from behind closed shutters, afraid to show even a moment of sympathy lest they to be marked for destruction. The same people who cheered for Gaius just hours ago now turn their backs as his wife and children are led away in chains. The journey to the slave markets is itself a form of torture designed to break the spirit before the real horrors begin. Julia is forced to walk through the forum stripped of her clothing, her children clinging to her as Romans of every social class gather to watch and jeer. Rotten vegetables and worse are hurled at them while voices shout obscenities that make hardened soldiers blush. This isn't random cruelty. It's calculated performance designed to strip away every last shred of dignity and humanity, to transform a person into an object before the actual sale begins. But the public humiliation serves another purpose entirely. It's advertising. As word spreads through Rome that the family of the famous Gladiator is being sold, wealthy Romans begin making their way to the markets, their purses heavy with gold and their intentions dark with appetites that normal slave markets cannot satisfy. These aren't ordinary buyers looking for household servants or manual laborers. These are connoisseurs of suffering, collectors who specialize in breaking the spirits of those who once knew freedom and love, who understand that the greatest pain comes not from destroying a slave, but from destroying someone who remembers what it meant to be free. Young Marcus, Julia's 6-year-old son, who still believes his father will rescue them, who still asks when they can go home, is the first to be sold. His innocence makes him particularly valuable to Lucius Varro, a Lanista who runs what he calls his special school in the hills outside Rome. This isn't a gladiator training facility in any traditional sense. It's a factory of systematic trauma where children are broken and remade into either perfect killers or hollow shells of humanity. Varro's methods have been refined through decades of experience. He understands that simply beating a child into submission creates rebellion, so instead he uses psychological warfare that would impress modern torturers. Marcus is placed in a cell with other boys who have already been broken, children who have learned that the only way to receive food is to inflict pain on newcomers. The boy is forced to choose between starvation and participating in the torture of others, a choice that destroys his soul long before any whip touches his skin. If this journey into history's darkest corners has gripped you, if you believe these buried truths deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button right now. Because only by understanding the depths of human cruelty can we recognize its warning signs in our own time. These aren't just ancient horror stories. They read lessons written in suffering about what happens when society decides some people are fully human. Your subscription helps ensure these voices aren't forgotten again. Meanwhile, 4-year-old Claudia faces a fate that Roman law considers perfectly legal, but which we would recognize today as systematic abuse of the most vulnerable. She's purchased by Quintus Fabius, a senator who operates a network of establishments catering to Romans with the most depraved appetites. Fabius has developed techniques for breaking young children that are horrifyingly effective. He understands that physical violence leaves marks that might upset his customers, so instead he uses psychological manipulation that leaves no visible scars, but destroys a child's capacity for trust, love, or hope. Claudia is placed with older girls who have already been completely broken, teenagers who themselves are victims, but who have learned that survival means compliance. These girls explain in gentle, motherly voices what will happen if Claudia doesn't cooperate, describing in detail the fates of children who resisted. They stroke her hair and whisper that the only way to avoid the worst punishments is to learn to smile, to pretend, to become the perfect victim. But it's Julia's fate that represents the pinnacle of Roman cruelty. She is purchased not by a single owner, but by a consortium of wealthy Romans who have formed what they call a grief society. These men, bored by conventional entertainment, have discovered that the suffering of a gladiator's widow provides a unique form of amusement. They've learned that the most exquisite pain comes not from physical torture, but from the complete destruction of everything a person holds dear. Julia is forced to watch as other gladiator families are destroyed according to the same systematic process that claimed her children. She is made to stand in the arena during executions holding a sign detailing her husband's failures and her family's disgrace. She is paraded through streets during religious festivals dressed as a defeated enemy, while crowds are encouraged to spit on her and curse her name. But the worst torture is hope. Every few months her owners tell her that her children are still alive, that she might be allowed to see them if she performs certain tasks. These tasks start small, cleaning floors, serving at banquets, but gradually escalate into acts of humiliation so profound that death would be mercy. She's forced to participate in mock gladiator fights where she always plays the defeated warrior, enacting her husband's failure night after night for the amusement of drunken Romans who bet on how long she can maintain her dignity before breaking down completely. The legal system provides no recourse because gladiator families exist in a state of legal non-personhood, unique even by Roman standards. Regular slaves at least have some protections under law. Their owners must provide minimal food and shelter, cannot kill them without cause, must treat them as valuable property. But gladiator families are classified as infames, people so degraded they have forfeited all human rights. They can be tortured, killed, or abused in any way their owners see fit, and no Roman court will hear their complaints. This legal status is deliberately designed to maximize suffering. Romans understand that uncertainty is often more painful than definitive punishment, so gladiator families live in constant terror, never knowing if today brings death, torture, abuse, or some new form of degradation that Roman creativity has devised. Perhaps most horrifying is the Roman practice of mercy that isn't merciful at all. When a gladiator family has been thoroughly broken, when their suffering no longer provides adequate entertainment, they're sometimes granted what appears to be freedom. They're released from slavery, given small amounts of money, told they can start new lives. But this freedom is an illusion, another form of torture designed to provide one final moment of hope before the ultimate cruelty. These freed family members are marked with special tattoos identifying them as former gladiator property. No Roman citizen will hire them, house them, or provide assistance. They're forbidden from leaving the city, trapped in Rome with no means of survival except begging or crime. When they inevitably turn to theft or prostitution to avoid starvation, they recaptured and punished with public executions advertised as examples of what happens to those who abuse Roman mercy. Records from the period, found in private letters of wealthy Romans, reveal the casual nature of this systematic cruelty. Senators write to friends about purchasing gladiator children the way we might discuss buying pets. They share techniques for maximizing suffering, compare responses of different family members to various forms of abuse, trade victims back and forth like collectible items. One particularly chilling document discovered in villa ruins outside Rome contains detailed instructions for properly managing gladiator families. It reads like a manual for systematic torture, complete with recommendations for different approaches based on age and gender of victims. It includes sections on maintaining hope for maximum despair, rotating punishments to prevent adaptation, and using family bonds as weapons against individual resistance. What happened to Julia and her children was not an isolated incident or the result of particularly cruel individuals. It was standard operating procedure, a systematic approach to human destruction woven into the very fabric of Roman society. Thousands of families suffered similar fates, their stories lost to history because Romans considered their suffering too mundane to record in detail. The few surviving accounts come not from official histories focused on arena glory, but from private letters, graffiti, and testimonies of slaves who managed to escape or buy their freedom. These fragments paint a picture of suffering so comprehensive and methodical that it challenges our fundamental understanding of human cruelty. This wasn't random violence or passion of the moment. It was calculated, institutionalized, and celebrated as entertainment. As we close this dark chapter, we must remember that the suffering of families like Julia's was not just ancient cruelty, it was a warning. It shows us what happens when a society decides that some people are less human than others, when entertainment becomes more important than empathy, when power operates without moral constraints. The screams that echoed through Roman streets 2,000 years ago remind us that the capacity for both unspeakable cruelty and profound compassion exists within every human heart, and the choice between them determines not just individual fate, but the soul of entire civilizations. The question we must ask ourselves is whether we are capable of recognizing when our own society begins walking down similar paths, when we start to see certain groups as less deserving of dignity, when we allow suffering to become background noise in our pursuit of comfort and entertainment. If this story has affected you as deeply as it should, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Do you see echoes of Rome's dehumanization in our modern world? What lessons should we take from these buried horrors? Your voice matters in keeping these warnings alive, in ensuring that we never forget what humans are capable of when we stop seeing each other as fully human. Let's continue this crucial conversation together.